Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie Ferraresso, and with me, as always, Jack Clabby, a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA, in Tampa. On the podcast today, we will chat with General Frank McKenzie, the Executive Director of the Global and National Security Institute at the University of South Florida and Executive Director of Cyber Florida. General McKenzie was promoted to the grade of general and assumed command of Central Command in March 2019. He relinquished command of CENTCOM and retired from the Marine Corps on April 1, 2022, after completing over 42 years of service. General McKenzie, we look forward to a great conversation. But first, hello to my co-host, Jack Clabby. Jack, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great today, Ernie. I'm doing great today. Everything okay with you?
You know, not too bad. But I will tell you this, Jack, I am a little concerned about you. I'm not going to lie, because for those who don't know, ran into Jack this past weekend, at a sporting event. We said our pleasantries, hello. And then, we parted ways, a crowded event. Jack wanted to get in touch with me. So how does he do it? I'm telling you, he sends me an email to my work email. And so, Jack, I'm concerned that you're not paying attention to your proper work-life balance.
So
That's
for
what
some
bothers
reason,
me.
I didn't have your mobile phone in my phone. I think I had it in my I just not saved it to the same place.
It was in your
where
burner phone. I get it. Yeah.
You know how those things grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with your background. So
Yeah.
So I did. The only way I could reach you was I thought, okay, I know his email address. So I sent you an email trying to just locate you. And I would have thought, right, that you would have had your finger on the pulse of all cybersecurity goings-ons and been ready to go there. But either way, a good day was had out on the bypass canal, watching some rowing.
Exactly.
Which is great. And it's a great sport for kids because it's one of the few sports where you absolutely cannot have a digital device with you when you're out on the water.
That's exactly correct. Exactly. Unless you got a heck of a good insurance plan. And I'm not doing that.
You're on a razor's edge of at any point.
Any moment.
But that's one of the rowing is one of the great Florida sports because we can be in the water, and all the kids can be in the water 12 months out of the year, which is a ton of fun. And, it is something that we're going to be talking to the general today that, I think a lot of the military academies have, right? Because it does have sort of a martial history associated with it. But we've been thinking about the general coming today. I was thinking about what impact it can have on an organization when someone with military leadership training comes into the organization, right? A lot of the workforce readiness program that's happening here in Florida is, doing exactly that, Ernie, where you're taking somebody with military training, often military leadership training, putting them in the private or the public sector. What are some of the things, what are some of the challenges and benefits of that from your perspective?
Yeah, I would tell you, part of the thing that I found, I don't want to say difficult, but most interesting and challenging is first off, a lot of the misperceptions on what being in the military is like. So if you're coming into an organization, people tend to have they seem to think you're going to act a certain way. That you have a certain, there's a certain, movie-esque way that you're going to do with it. And then I also think on the other side that you also, coming in from the military, you're getting, people oftentimes will tell you, oh yeah, well, you're going to have to adapt to this. There's places people are going to tell you, oh, we're just not going to do that. And it's not, and you can't tell me what to do. And so you as if, that's like the first thing you're going to do is you're going to just walk in here and say, you go do this and go pick up that. So it's that when things come together, it's trying to, that's where you've got that first, I'll call it a transition period when you're going into that new job. So your first job is really, challenging in that is bringing that together. But what I do think ends up happening, for those that are successful and really, I'll call it leaping out into the private sector world, is identifying what are the really good things or the applicable things that that being in the military provides. I think it's perspective on a lot of things, because generally speaking, in the military, a lot of the areas where you're dealing with and the things that you're doing have some pretty broad consequences beyond just, I'll call it financial. If you're in the business community, that type of thing. If something doesn't go right, bad things can happen to, so there's that. So that kind of puts a lot of things into perspective. Kind of, I talk, the way I think about it is, particularly in the field in where I am, it's, I like to remind people, okay, nothing that we do or don't do today is going to result in somebody dying. So, they kind of keep that in mind. But then also I think you're also exposed to, especially as you get further along, a broad range of different situations and different styles and people. Just because of the nature of it, if you do more than one assignment, you're moved around basically at least every 3 years. So every 3 years, you're starting a new job. So you kind of have that experience of, okay, I'm going to someplace new. How do I start over? And that was one of the things that I didn't realize was exactly that, because my sister started a new job in, I guess, a couple 3 years ago, and she was, practically panicked about going to this new job. And I was like, what's the big deal? I mean, you just go and you do this. And then it dawned on me, this was the second time that she had done this, and she's, she's in her 30s, right?
Yeah.
So that was that side of it. But I think it's been, there's a lot of good things, but
I like that as a counterintuitive, for hiring folks out there thinking that hiring someone from the military would be rigid, that it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Because they're forced adaptability, that they, if someone's been in the service for, more than 6 years, they've had at least 2 jobs, and often in 2 locations, if not many more than that. And I like that way of thinking about it. And that's something we've certainly see with our veterans who work for us, both as attorneys and as staff hires. One thing I do want to mention, as we think about leadership today, I was on an airplane a couple of days ago. This was last week, Thursday and Friday, and they had it was before the holiday, and so they had a selection of Christmas movies. This was on the United flight back from New York to Tampa.
Yes.
And I'm clicking on Christmas movies, and what do I see as a Christmas movie? Not Die Hard. We've talked about this, I think, on the program before, but I also saw Gremlins.
Really?
Gremlins is a Christmas movie. I'd completely forgotten the Mowgli that is the gift to the boy.
That's right. It all starts.
He's not even a boy. He's actually graduated and he's working at a bank. I'd forgotten about that too. He gets this as a gift from his dad, who is an inventor, at Christmas, for Christmas. It's his gift. And that starts the whole adventure that happens. Now, one other thing that, if you remember, when they turn, the spoiler alert, right? The Gremlins turn.
Yeah, I think we get it's like having antique plates on a car at that time. If we're going to tell you about it,
25 years. I think it was an 84 or an 86 movie, mid 80s movie. So early on, when the Mowgli replicates, one of them has the stripe down the head.
Yes.
Says, the one with the stripe down the head seems to be the leader. And then that later on, it's a little foreshadowing, I believe, is the director's technique there. Becomes a leader later on. And so that kind of it was not a taught leadership. It was an innate leadership, which I don't necessarily agree with. And maybe the military would not agree with that either.
I think you're correct on 2 points. First, I do believe that, leadership is something that can be taught. And it's a question of enabling as a good leader and building other leaders, is making sure that the people are in the right place, that you put them in situations for them to succeed, and they can grow in that. And secondly, perhaps more important, that yes, I would agree that Gremlins is in fact a Christmas movie, because of the way you just describe it, that the entire movie does not happen unless he receives this gift at Christmas.
That's right.
And I want to say that it has to take place in the wintertime. It did all of those things play into it.
There's snow. There's a car that won't start. Corey Feldman, at one point, as a young man, as a kid, he's dressed up like a Christmas tree in a disguise. But it has a fantastic. So I got through maybe the first half, and now I have to finish the second half because the flight ended. But there was a great 80s trope, which you don't see anymore, where they want to figure out what's going on. They don't go to the government or the police. they
Or
go
the
to
internet.
the science.
which
Oh, no,
doesn't
the internet.
internet. That's not here.
They go to the science teacher. So a kid who has graduated walks into a high school, finds his old science teacher and asks the science teacher to run some experiments.
See,
Which-
the high school science teacher.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Which is awesome. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
if you went in and did it now, science teacher would be really excited about it, but you don't see it it was like, that was like a great 80s thing. Like the
You go
science
back
teacher's
again.
going
You
to
know
open
who
up
can
the
help us?
laboratory and run some tests for a couple of kids who graduated a year ago. Like
Wow.
it's bananas, but it's a great little segment.
There
of
was, speaking of that,
the movie.
was what was the name of it? It was one of these movies where it was about, I don't know if it was time travel or something, but that's somebody had found one of the kids, they had graduated, they went to the
Yeah.
junkyard and they had found some device and they didn't know what it was. And they turned it on and it turned out it was like a time travel, and it was
Love it.
bringing parts like dinosaurs and things back. And where did they go to find answers? They went back to their old high school because
Awesome.
you know who helped? Mr. Johansson. He'll know how to
That's right.
deal with this. And of course,
And you see it on Stranger Things too. There's
Yeah.
because the AV, he's like awesome, right? He's helping the kids in a real way. So I think science teachers now who are listening to this,
yes.
you got to write some angry letters to Hollywood and say, we need to improve.
Bring
We
it
go
back.
back to the 80s. You guys were like the leading, you were like in the town, you were the repository of science knowledge. and your
Exactly.
doors were open. So,
If there was some cataclysmic disaster,
awesome.
who do they call?
Yeah.
The science teacher.
Yeah, go down there and do it. Even when
Yeah.
the Gremlins start to have problems. So
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, No,
Yeah.
I won't go all the way on it because I forget what's happens in the second half, but that's
Yeah,
my
I
report.
won't ruin it too much for you.
Gremlins is a Christmas movie. It has half the cast of Fast Times from at Ridgemont High in it. I was also surprised by that. But a good one. Anyway, that's our PSA for movies to watch. We may have.
There you go. Gremlins. Put them on your holiday list right after Christmas vacation. But tee up Gremlins. And with that said, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to talk to General Frank McKenzie about his leadership style and how it's evolved over time. And we may delve into some discussions about, 80s movies and such. So stick around.
Looking for more no password required content? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at No Password Pod.
All right, welcome back. Our guest is General Frank McKenzie, the Executive Director of the Global and National Security Institute and the Executive Director here at Cyber Florida. General McKenzie, welcome to No Password Required.
Ernie, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm particularly glad that I don't need a password to be aboard.
Excellent, excellent. But we do have other ways of verifying identity around here, but we'll get to that later on.
General, can you tell us a little bit about your career path? I mean, it's familiar to a lot of us, but maybe not to our listeners. And, how did you get started? And, how did that path lead you to where you are now with your positions at USF and Cyber Florida?
Sure. So I was very lucky to have 42 years, 10 months, and 3 days on active duty in the United States Marine Corps. And when I started back in May of 1979, I had no idea that my career would last that long or that I would end up as a 4-star officer in command of United States Central Command. I went into the Marine Corps because I found it to be a challenge. I'd always been interested in being a Marine, even before I went to the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I had a desire to pursue a commission in the Marine Corps. So that sort of stayed steady with me. So I knew that I wanted to do that. I knew I wanted to be an infantry officer. I knew I wanted to deploy. I knew I wanted to go forward. And so I think after I got to the Citadel, the thing that further attracted me to the Marine Corps was the people. If there's one theme really that's carried on and why you hang around an organization for over 4 decades, it's the people that you meet. The men and the women that are in the United States Marine Corps are fantastic. And so I've had the opportunity to be led by them and to lead them over the course of a very long and rewarding career, doing a lot of different things. I mean, I started off as an infantry officer. I was eventually trained to have another job as a tank officer, what we call a secondary military occupational specialty. And then over time, I began to work more in the strategy and the policy realm, and introduced to that up in the National Capital Region, up in DC, where I was exposed to that. So all of those things over time, your career sort of flowers. and luck and opportunity came together, and I was able to stay around for a very long time. But I'll tell you, the day I left the Marine Corps, I was just as energetic about being a Marine as the day I entered the Marine Corps. Today, talking to you, I love the Marine Corps just as much and regard that experience just as rewarding as any day on active duty. Could not have been a better experience for me.
How do you keep that up? Like, how do you maintain that? What drives that?
Well, I'll tell you, part of it is, you have designs on what you want to do. What's the big picture? What do you want to do? When I came in the Marine Corps, I never thought about being a general or doing anything like that. I thought about being a good platoon commander, being a good company commander, doing as good as I could with the jobs that I was given, and maximizing the opportunities for those people that work for me. So I sort of focused on that. And so what you do is you deal with the job that you got. You don't worry about the things you can't control. What you do, though, is you in fact worry a lot about the things that you can control. That's what you want to, and so knowing how to divide those two. Some things you can tilt at a will, you can tilt against a windmill forever, and it's not going to change. So you need to understand what those things are, and you need to understand what are the things that you can have an effect on, and that's where you need to spend your energy. And over time, as you mature, your planning horizon goes out. You think to yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? What do I want my family to be doing in 5 years? And in the Marine Corps, what kind of job do I want to have in 5 years? And so over time, as you go a little older, you don't think about that as a brand new Marine lieutenant. But by the time you're a captain or a major, you begin to think about those things. And then, so that's how it sort of worked out for me. Over time, I think I matured, but I always tried to do the very best at the thing I was doing, and not worry about the things you can't influence or control.
And how did you, General, how did you connect with USF? How did that process come about?
So this is, I've lived in Tampa 3 times. I lived in Tampa from 2010 to 2012 as the J5, the planner for U.S. Central Command. Came back in 2014 to be the commander of all Marine forces in the Middle East as a 3-star job. Then, of course, I came back the 3rd time in 2019 to be the Central Command commander as a 4-star officer. Over that period of time, I got to know Rhea Law. And we got to know each other socially. Great. We found that we enjoyed each other's company, and I developed a great respect for her. And so as I began to look at what I was going to do after I left active duty, she talked to me about possibly coming up here and doing some work at USF. I didn't know a whole lot about USF, except they beat Auburn, the team I follow in college football. I do remember that. And I remember that they had some glory days in football in the past, but I didn't know a whole lot more about USF. But I got to know Rhea real well. And I got to tell you, I think the university has hit a home run with her as the president. She is a strong leader. She's not afraid to make decisions. She listens to input. She knows people, takes care of people. And, I keep coming back to the theme of people. It really is all about people. So we talked about doing something up here. I had an opportunity to do a little investigation. And then when I did begin to work up here, I was just, again, impressed with the people. There's a lot of energy at USF. It's a new institution. It's not bound by ancient rules and laws of the past that affect some institutions of higher learning, but it's focused on the future, and it's not afraid to take risks and look bravely into the future. So, hey, that's an organization I want to be associated with. So it was a great fit. I look forward to coming to work every day up here.
I got to tell you, the USF football is awesome, and a lot of people go to it. But one of the best kept secrets, if it's even a secret anymore in the Tampa Bay area, is USF basketball. Yes, because it's a great place to see a game, and they have outstanding competition, and they have a good team. So I even went at times during the pandemic and just thought, this is amazing when they would let us go. So it was just a really special place and a great place to spend time. So in all your roles, from the beginning as a lieutenant through to today, you've been leading people. General, how would you describe your leadership style, and has it changed over time?
Well, sure. So it certainly has matured. What I did as a captain or a lieutenant colonel is not how you behave as a general. So when you're a young officer commanding a rifle platoon or a rifle company, you got to be the best person in that unit at doing all the soldier skills. You got to know how to break a weapon down. You got to know how to operate that weapon. You got to be strong, very physical. All those things you have to be able to do, because the Marines down there, they're looking at you. So you got to do that. As you get older, and so you're dealing with units of 30 Marines and 120, 150 Marines in a rifle company. But as you get older and you accept positions of greater responsibility, you're no longer directly affecting individual Marines. Instead, your subordinates are those lieutenant colonels and colonels who command the Marines. So you're now working with a group of older and more mature Marines. So your leadership has got to change a little bit. You've got to be able to articulate why you want to do things. Although I will say this, with Marines and soldiers, in fact, with any American fighting man or woman, they want to know why they're doing something. Yeah. You can't just tell them to do it. And that's the strength of the United States. Nobody does things blindly in the U.S. military. That's perhaps a common misconception. It's certainly a misconception. But the truth of the matter is, if you want to get, and it's not Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, don't know much about that. I do know that they're not markedly different from, say, the people that went off to the Second World War. Yeah. And that you've got to convince them that what they're doing is the right thing to do if they're going to put their life on the line. Then what you as a commander have got to do is you've got to say, hey, we're going to go in, we're going to do this job. And what I promise you is I'll have the best possible plan to go in and do that job and to get as many of you back out as I can. And that's what a commander does. That's what he or she's primary responsibility. Now, here's the thing. As General Jim Mattis used to say, we are not a life assurance corporation. So I can't promise you you're all going to come back. And that's not really why we're here. We're here to do the mission we've been given by the people of the United States, by the president and the commander in chief. So if we're going to do that, the commander's responsibility is, again, to have a plan, to ensure the plan is resourced, and then you got to sell the plan. It's all about teaching and mentoring. People want to have confidence in the leader that he can actually get them into that and get them out. Everybody knows the odds, especially infantry Marines. They know the profession they're in, and they know the risks that are inherent to that profession. And so nobody expects 100% of everybody to come back every time. What they want to know, though, is you're going to do the best possible job to get them in and get them out. And if someone gets hit and hurt, you're going to get them out. You're not going to leave anybody behind. People want to know that. They'll fight very hard if they know that, because at the small unit level and even the larger level, people don't fight for the big thing. They don't fight for the flag. They fight for the people around them. They fight for that organization, their friends. And transactional leadership is gotten a bad connotation, but there is an element of transactional leadership there. You guys got to go forward and do this work. I'm going to give you the best possible plan to do this work, and I'll get you out. But you got to do what I tell you to do.
That point that you made a moment ago too about needing to know why and how that's a strategic advantage we have with Americans fighting forces versus a lot of other, non-democratic fighting forces. Right. I mean, that's a very good point that I think a lot of people don't understand.
The heart of the soldier is the heart of the Marine, the airman, whatever. It's the unique thing in warfare. It's hard to calculate. That's why the war in Ukraine is developing the way it is. The Ukrainians are fighting. They're fighting for their country. Russian conscripts are not fighting for anything, and they have very poor leadership. So you've got no fighting spirit to begin with, and then you've got very, very poor leadership. Their leaders are not doing the things I just described, which is to say, here's our plan. Let me share our plan with you so you know and understand it. And then here's how I'm going to supply you. Here's what we're going to do if we get into a pinch. The commanders have a responsibility to explain that. The Russian system has never been good at doing it, and it has been uniquely bad at doing it in this current campaign in Ukraine.
That's something, another point that you made about leadership is that there's, at the initial level, you need to know the job of everyone who's in that particular unit, right? You need to be proficient or not best at it.
That's right.
But at some point, if a leader is doing a good job, they're going to get promoted to a place where they do have people underneath them. And we think about cybersecurity leadership where there might be a CISO who's really good at risk, but doesn't necessarily understand computer programming at a granular level, the same way somebody who's sitting on the systems and defending it is. How should, is there any advice for how a leader who finds himself?
Yeah. So you as a leader, and particularly a fairly senior leader, you have to have trust in your people. You have to, and they have to know that you trust them. And there are a couple of ways to do that. One way is this, particularly in the military, but I think it's actually true anywhere, is you've got to be the same way when they give you good information as when they give you bad information. I mean, negative information. Yeah. So what you can't do is be a great guy till they come up and say, oh, it's going off the rails, and turn into a raging maniac. You can't do that. And here's why. Because people will still have to work for you because they got to, and they'll still have to give you information. But what they will do, nobody likes to be, figuratively slapped in the face. So they will shade that information to try to avoid that. And what you as a leader, particularly in a technical domain like cyber or any one of a number of other domains, is you need accurate information. And so people have got to feel I can talk to the boss whether I got good news or bad news.
Yeah.
So what I used to tell people when I was on active duty was this. I used to be the military secretary to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, which is a colonel that's the personal assistant to the Commandant. I was the director of the Joint Staff. There's no bad news you can give me that I haven't heard before about what human beings do to each other. There's nothing you can tell me. So, but here's the thing. People have got to see that. You can't tell them that. I'll tell you, every time I've worked for somebody and he said, hey, I'm a great guy, you're going to learn working for me. Unfailingly, that person turned out to be a jerk. So when I have a new organization, I don't say I'm a great guy, we're going to get along fine. I say, look, we're going to accomplish the mission here, but we're going to do it in a reasonable manner. And I'm going to look out for your interests, but it has to be demonstrated. And all it takes is one getting off your rails once with people and they remember it. So you've got to have relentless personal discipline when it comes to organization, when it comes to organizational leadership.
Does that, that's another sort of maybe misconception about military service, or maybe it's right that, the leaders has to be up before everyone else and goes to bed after everyone else. Is that somewhat true?
I'll tell you, that's true. And that's really true of any organization, actually. But, the big thing in the military is you're going to eat last. The Marine Corps officers eat after everybody else is eating. We eat last. If you're out on a hike, while you walk 50 minutes, you take a 10-minute break, you sit down, change your socks. Leaders need to be walking up and down the column, checking other people's feet, making sure their feet are okay. Because in the infantry business, your feet are your means of moving. So it's a critical tool that you got to examine all the time, which means they don't get to check their own feet because they're checking other people's feet. So yeah, you expect and require leaders to do that. Now look, you get to be a 4-star general, it's hard to do that because you're removed from that, but you still need to find ways to signal it. And there are ways to do that. But yeah, it is important that people down in the, on the floor working, they know and understand their leaders are working hard too. And that is, I think it's very important. And I think that's often overlooked. And, you can compensate people, you can pay people well, and those are important things.
Yeah.
But people also need to feel that their bosses are in it with them.
Yep. I'm not going to have you come in on a weekend in an office environment if I'm not willing to do that too.
That's right.
It's something as simple as that, right?
You're exactly right.
Yeah. What I got to ask too, like, so for all your successes in sort of your focus on this, what do you eat for breakfast? Do you have like a special routine for breakfast that you get up every
classic
day?
Krabby right there. That's it.
Yeah. I want to know because
yeah. So, when I was in command of Central Command and when I was working and really now a little bit, I get up, what I'll do is I'll try to PT first thing. I'll run or I'll get on the Peloton or do something like that. And then I'll fix myself a couple of eggs over easy. A low-fat bagel, a thin bagel, and 2 pieces of turkey sausage. And that's what I eat for breakfast. And I do it every morning. And that way, I don't have to think about it. Same way. Now, on the weekends, Marilyn and I might do something different. And I typically fix my wife's breakfast when I'm doing that because she does all the other meals. But I'll typically do breakfast.
Are you a coffee guy too, or do you a coffee guy?
I'm a coffee guy, but I'm a decaf coffee guy.
Okay.
Went off caffeinated coffee I go on and off, but I've been off caffeinated coffee for about 2.5 years now. And I drink a lot of coffee. I like the taste of coffee, but I try to drink decaf coffee, and I don't drink any soft drinks at all. And but off that, I've been off soft drinks for probably 10 years. And but that's my routine in the morning. And while I'm eating, I read. And my morning routine is I read the Washington Post, I read the Wall Street Journal, I read the New York Times, I read the Tampa Bay Times. I used to read USA Today. I dip in and out of that. I read Financial Times, all electronically. Everything's electronic.
Oh, wow.
Read all those. I try to read all those journals every day. And then every week I read The Economist, which is the best news magazine in the world and maybe the best magazine in the world. Yeah. And then the second best magazine in the world is The New Yorker. And I read The New Yorker religiously. I read Harper's every month. I read The Atlantic every month. Wow. And the magazine I just stopped because I had a subscription since high school is Rolling Stone. I've read Rolling Stone through good times and bad.
That's awesome.
And I tell you, it's just moved beyond its roots so much now
Yeah.
that it's not worth it. Even the music articles they're like written by aliens. It's hard,
Yeah,
it's
it
hard
used to be 80%, 90% music,
Yeah, that's
and now
right.
then it became movies, and
Right.
now it's politics. It
Right.
just got
It's
so far.
politics, and
Yeah.
I liked it. I can remember when it was in a paper, it came like a newspaper, and back in the good old days. And I've read it since high school. I just cut my subscription like last month because I tell you, I just don't find it interesting.
Yeah.
And I've got a limit. The big thing about being a senior leader in any organization is it's time. What do you do with your time?
Yeah.
Because you can change any resource you have except time. That's the one thing that affects us all equally. Money, all kinds of other things. You can add more, you can take it away, but what you can't do is you can't modify time. And so I'm very conscious of how I spend my time.
Did you, on your way up, did you have mentors? Is there anybody who stands out as a really powerful mentor for you?
The first is a woman named Michelle Flournoy. She was the former Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. I worked for her as a fellow 1999, 2000 at the Institute for National Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. And she was, and what we did was she got a small group of people together to take a look at the Quadrennial Defense Review. We don't do it anymore, but it used to be a 4-year study of the state of the military, made recommendations. It was a pretty big deal several years ago. And so I was exposed to her for 18 months. And I would tell you, she was brilliant and demanding, a strong leader. And a lot of my views about higher level policy strategy were directly informed by my interaction with her.
Oh, wow.
So she's been very, very, very formative in my career outside the Marine Corps. And we stay in touch to this day. And she's just a wonderful person. I can't say enough good things about Michelle. So she's been very important to me. Look, inside the Marine Corps, there are a number of Marine generals, colonels, too many to name here, all of whom that took me under their wing, shared stuff with me. And mentoring is a very important part of being an officer. People know, just a fact, people know who your mentors are. They know, they sort of know your track record as a result of that. So it's an important thing. We need to do better at that in the Marine Corps and across all the services, actually, and making that more available to everybody, not just people that look like me, but to women, to other minorities. And my service, the Marine Corps, has struggled with that. We don't have it solved, but I can tell you this: they do recognize it's a problem. And one of the things I've been very conscious of doing when I mentor people is I'm looking to be very broad and diverse in my approach to that.
Yeah. Is there like another thing too? Like sometimes you hear about leaders in business community or in government might say, I really want to stay in touch with people, but I'm too busy. I lose track, right? But no one's busier than a general. No one's busier than you, right? How did you, over the years, how did you stay in touch with people? Do you do phone calls? Do you try to see them? How do you stay in touch?
So email actually helps a lot.
Okay.
Email, I do Facebook, but I do Facebook actually very narrowly, mainly family.
Okay.
Once I retired, I've gotten into LinkedIn. And I never did LinkedIn on active duty. There were reasons why I didn't do that. Yeah. But now that I'm retired, I'm actually I'm a lot more open to contacts on LinkedIn than I am on Facebook. But, I'll tell you, I try to stay in touch with phone calls, messages, not letters so much anymore, with a couple of exceptions. And I would tell you that's something I need to do better at.
Okay.
I need to do better, but I will always tell people, shoot me an email. And I never mind getting an email from somebody. It may take me a while to answer it, and but I'll try to do that. But you're right. You hit on a key thing. It's important to stay in touch. It's very important to do that.
I heard about a concept the other day called email bankruptcy, which is the idea that I'm just going to write an email to all my contacts saying, I'm very sorry. I've been busy. I haven't written you guys back. Please don't be offended. I'm declaring email bankruptcy. If you want my attention, all new emails from this day forward, I will do my best to respond to.
We're starting new right here. This is
starting fresh. I'm doing it. Email bankruptcy.
Well, that's a thought. I'm going to file that one away.
That's a good tip.
But you had a master's degree in teaching, I think. Yeah. That's something that I think was surprising when we saw about you. How have you used that in your career?
Okay, so when I was a young captain, lieutenant captain, I actually was assigned to Marine Barracks Charleston. It doesn't exist anymore. It used to be a naval weapons station there, a big Navy base, nuclear submarine base, and the Marine Corps provided security for it. After my first overseas assignment in Okinawa, I came back. So I was in Charleston, lived there for 3 years as a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and a brand new captain. And so I had the opportunity to go back to school at night, and the Citadel's there.
Oh, wow.
Obviously. And so the Citadel has a night program that's unrelated to the Corps cadets and all the military stuff. It just, what it does is it principally served, the local community for teachers that wanted to get, that wanted to pursue degrees. So at the time, this is early 1980s, the only master's program they had was an MAT, a Master of Arts in Teaching. So I was there. I wanted to get a master's degree. So I got into that
That's
program
awesome.
at night. The concentration's in history, but I never regretted that. And so I went on, and actually my next assignment, to get this right, my next assignment after, 2 assignments down the road, I was at the Virginia Military Institute, and I was able to teach there, and actually won the Junior Professor Teaching Award, the Thomas Jefferson Teaching Award. And I enjoy teaching. I enjoy being in the classroom. Again, it goes back, it's a central theme. I like being around people. I like talking to people. And that was another very rewarding experience at the Virginia Military Institute.
Wow. And that's a big part of teaching at the higher education level, is not just learning how to teach, but also learning how other people learn.
That's correct. You have to be sensitive to different learning styles, and it'll be obvious to you. Some people are visual learners. Some people have to listen. Some people need to read. And for some it's a combination of all three. And but you're right. You have to be sensitive to that. So you spend 3 years teaching undergraduates at the freshman or sophomore level, and you gain an appreciation for that. And it was very helpful to me also to be back around young people, even younger people than many Marines during that period of time. And from 88 to 1991, that's what I did. I also coached football there, and that was very rewarding also.
You think about too, like how many football coaches, high schools or colleges across the country, at least before the professionalization of that, were teachers who were also football coaches, right?
So coaching football is teaching. You got to teach. You got to be able to teach. Just like anything else, if you're inarticulate as a teacher and you're coaching, it's going to be hard to get your message across. And people, again, it's like any other discipline. They've got to believe you got a path to success, and you got to teach them. And so coaching, whether it's football, basketball, name the sport, it is in fact all about conveying a message and getting buy-in from the people you're talking to.
Do you have a professional football team that you root for?
So I'm a big Bucs fan.
Okay.
I'm a recovering Washington football team. But I'm a Bucs fan. Yeah, and it's easy to like the Bucs because it's a good organization. They're good people. The owners are good. I think they try to do a lot of good things in the Tampa Bay area. And of course, they're winning. They were last year. We'll see what they do this year. But I think it's just a good organization. So it's an easy professional team to follow. And so I really grew up in Alabama. So professional football is not a big thing in the state of Alabama. Well, it is, except it's college professional football. And so, in Alabama, you're either an Auburn or an Alabama person. So my family are Auburn people. And but the state of Alabama has never really been penetrated by loyalties to external professional football teams. Atlanta never was a big factor in Alabama, and and New Orleans has never been a big factor. It's not, because you got Auburn and Alabama there, and other teams now as well, such as the University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Knowing all you know about leadership and having coached football, can you, like when you're watching a football game now, can you relax, or are you thinking about what you would do, thinking about how you would change tactics?
So I like to watch the technical game. Given a choice, I'd watch the 22-man view. You know what I'm talking about? Where they zoom out. You see, I hate it when they zoom down. You can't see what the free safety's doing, what the quarterback's doing. So I like watching that. I like listening to the technical side of it. I can take or leave the commentary, from the broadcasters. I mean, I get emotional about Auburn football when they play, because I have much of my life's been associated with following them for good or bad. I'm a lot more clinical or detached with professional football, because the game is different. I mean, college football is a game of mismatch. Big mismatch where you've got to be artistic and find a way to compensate for market inferiority. Professional football, it is a game of mismatch as well, but the degree of mismatch is so infinitesimally small that it's unless, and here's the other thing, unless you spend time looking at video, it's hard to know why a coach does what he does. So when people criticize coaches, I'm always sensitive to the fact that they put hundreds of hours of study in to make that decision. Doesn't mean it wasn't still a mistake, but they looked at it as a reason, because what you don't want to do is come up with it on the sideline. You've thought about it all week. What you want to do in this situation, so you call the play and run it.
Yeah. And they're not getting the idea that I love the idea of the armchair, guy watching at home who say, what is obvious? They should have been in a cover 2.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you talking about?
I couldn't agree more. It's very easy to be critical. And, look, football coaches are well compensated, so it comes with the territory. But you're right. It's like people, most people don't realize the incredible amount of work that goes into prep a team to play, and just the intellectual investment in the game plan, in the coaching and the teaching and the scheming to get ready to play a game.
You've worked with Marines and you've been in all manner of roles. And then sometimes you hear folks describe a football game as war or battle, or these are my soldiers, right? How do you feel when you hear that? Are you okay with that, or is it weird?
It's okay. I mean, look,
okay.
So it's not war because nobody's getting killed, and that's sort of that's a key thing. But it's always had that attachment. I mean, historically, going back to roots of the origins of football in the United States, there was the earliest NCAA involvement in football was to inculcate young men with more warlike qualities. There were fears that we were becoming too soft. And so, football is an interesting approach to this, but we should never confuse football with war. It's a fun thing. We're going to walk away though. We're going to play a game next week. So but it's very different. So I typically don't tend to use that analogy. But I don't begrudge someone who does use that.
Yeah. Well, and just, we're going to do some fun stuff in a minute here, but I wanted to just get one more perspective from you on, in the time that you were in service, and then now working with Cyber Florida, like what have you seen as how technology, particularly cyber warfare, but technology generally has transformed or changed combat? So
cyber considerations and what we call the cyber domain, the cyber universe that's out there, the vast internet. There's an old saying, the internet is vast and infinite. And the internet is vast and infinite because the internet maps the human terrain, and it is practically infinite. So from when I came in the Marine Corps in 1979 until now, it has revolutionized everything. As a combatant commander, when I thought about anything, I began by thinking about cyber. Cyber is an element of our plan. Cyber is an element of the potential enemy's plan, how it could affect us, how we might want to affect them, the merging of cyber effects, which is what things that happen on the battlefield, cyber effects, kinetic, non-kinetic effects, all of those things. It has revolutionized warfare, and that revolution is continuing. We have not yet seen the final thing. I'll put it in perspective like this. There are two new domains that we study in the military, space and cyber, okay? So I believe cyber is actually more demanding and more infinite than space. People would disagree with me on that, but that's just my opinion. Space, at least for right now, we're talking, low Earth orbit, high Earth orbit, geosynchronous orbit, cislunar space, all of that, that's a problem. But the cyber is actually, I believe, more difficult to quantify and understand.
Yeah, we're going to be using cybersecurity resources to communicate with any sort of satellites or
that's right. And you're right. The two domains are linked. The United States is absolutely, without our satellite constellation, we would be, to use in the hurt locker. We got to have the satellite constellation, and we are very vulnerable. The United States has the most powerful offensive cyber capabilities in the world. What we can do is eye-watering. We also have a glass jaw. We are the most vulnerable society in the world to cyber attack because of the ubiquity of the systems in the United States, because everything runs off that backbone, everything. And it's open, and it's not, there are no really good national policies. So that's an issue. And that's why the work is so interesting at Cyber Florida.
That's right. You think about, the power goes out in the Tampa Bay region and people's watches stop working. Whatever happened to you have a wind up watch, and now everybody's got a watch that needs to get recharged. You're like, you have to have a working watch, guys. Come on, let's think about redundancies.
But we should be very concerned about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you very much. We're going to take a short break now. And when we return, we'll have Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. So stay with us.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
Okay, welcome back, General McKenzie. As you may be aware, the lifestyle polygraph is issued to members of the intelligence community to determine their suitability to have access to some of the nation's greatest secrets. However, here on No Password Required, we have our own version of it, mostly so that we can just find out what people, what makes people tick. So we've got a series of questions, 5 questions that are going to kind of, you talked a lot about, how you got where you are and who's influenced you and your thinking, but we're going to dive in a little bit deeper now. So, sir, are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
I'm ready, Ernie. Go ahead. Start your questions.
Question number one. What is something that you already miss about military life?
I think what I miss the most about military life, in the latter part of my career anyway, is your mainlining knowledge. You're fed with the best information in the world all day. Just about everything going on. And so you have a very good sense of what's going on behind the headlines everywhere in the world. And that actually is addictive, is profoundly addictive. And so when you leave, for a guy like me, around mid-afternoon on the last day of March, or 1 April, it cut off and that went away.
Yeah, they cold turkeyed you.
So now I'm reading The Economist, and which is a very good magazine, but I'm not reading the President's Daily Briefing anymore, and all the other things that really sort of give you, behind the curtain. I miss that, and the other thing I would just say, and I miss the people. Probably deeply, just you're always in a group of people that you work with. You feel that you're working toward a common and important goal, a good goal, a noble goal, and you sort of miss that. And that's probably the biggest thing. And so you sort of wander around a little bit, and because it's very sudden, it's abrupt. Because when you're a combatant commander, you go from 100% to 0% in the course of an afternoon, and so that's a pretty significant change.
It's a silly point, but what about uniform? Like you didn't, if you're wearing a uniform and you're on service, you don't have to worry about what to wear in the morning. Did you have to go buy a bunch of clothes? No.
So by the time you're a co-com, and I got no shortage of civilian clothes.
All right.
That's a great point. But it is, so you do have to. You have to decide, what you're going to wear to work every day, which was never a problem before. But actually, most guys that retire about when I have, you've got tons of clothes. So picking something, having it's not a problem. Picking it is, but luckily I've got my wife who advises me pretty aggressively on what I need to wear.
Well, and I got to tell you, sir, you've been a pretty snappy dresser. I got to tell you, you're not hurting in that space. That's pretty good.
Well, it's not me; it's my wife.
My wife only has veto power. It's only she's not helpful. She doesn't help me. It's only telling me what I can't. You can't go out the door looking like that.
And I think most days, Jack, you just walk. You try to sneak out ahead of that.
That's why I get up early. It's not personal motivation. It's the way I can escape without having to be told what to wear. When I worked for the government, I wore a suit every day. I just had 5 suits, and you just rotated, and it was easy. White shirt, 5 suits, you're good. And then when I left, someone told me about business casual, and I was like, wait a minute, what? I have to buy khakis now? What is this about? So I just bought 5 pairs of pants, 5 new shirts. It's good to go. So just repeated it.
Okay, here we are. Question number 2. Moving on. What is your favorite board game?
So my favorite board game is going to be hard to actually describe, because my primary hobby is the collection of war games from the 70s, 80s, and beyond. So I've got a collection of several hundred games, including some of you may recall a company named Avalon Hill.
Absolutely.
Put out a lot of games.
Yes,
Simulations Publications Incorporated that put out a lot of games. GDW, on and on. I can name the alphabet soup of game producers that made these games. So I have a lot of games, and I would say this: it would be a conflict simulation game. It wouldn't be a game like Monopoly, which is a perfectly fine game, or Risk or something like that. But it's a good game. I will tell you a game that sort of catches my attention. It's hard to play because it's hard to get everybody together. Is a game called Diplomacy.
Diplomacy. That was a great one. We did that one, and Kingmaker was the other one that we used to
Kingmaker is
play.
very good too. The
Yeah.
War of the Roses.
Yeah.
Though I put Kingmaker in there as well. Good games. I enjoy them. You know, the problem is it's hard to find somebody to play them. And really for diplomacy, you need 5 people. And there's been some computer simulations out there that have tried to work diplomacy, not very well. It really is something best played, you know, sort of person to person. But I enjoy games. I collect them. I don't get much of a chance to play them now.
Now, is that game? Is that the one you're when you play you're most competitive with? Is that?
I was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I was pretty good at it. It requires ability to read people, know and understand people, because, you know, diplomacy is, there's not a lot of chance in diplomacy. It really is relationships among the players of the game that you sort of negotiate.
What was the other one? Oh, Air Assault on Crete. That's
the other good game
with the Malta option as well.
Right, with the Malta add-on at the back end of that. Yeah, that's a very good game. That's a very good game.
Yeah.
A lot of good games, and that of course is a game from the 70s, late 70s,
yep.
Which was sort of the heyday of board wargaming, and then it fell off in the 80s, 90s, and it's in a renaissance now. As we speak right now, there are a number of very good publishers out there that are making very good war games. The problem is the games today tend to be highly complex, much more complex than the games of the 70s and 80s. You know, 100 to 200 page rule books. So it's quite an effort. If you want to get into one of those games, you got to invest the time to learn the system.
It's something where like Kickstarter has really helped with that, because if you have a cool idea, you can take in. You don't need a lot, right? Just take enough to just put together a couple prototypes. That's right. And then you can give them out. So it's kind of neat to see. I mean, that even that section of like a store like Target has gotten bigger. You know, strategy gaming has gotten bigger, even in mainstream stores as a result. I think of these games that card-based games that started through crowdfunding.
No, you're right. And for the company, the big game companies like GMT today or MMP, the runs of games are fairly small. So because they've learned the hard way from SPI, which made a lot of games and couldn't sell them, even though they sold a lot of games, they sort of killed themselves with their business model. The companies now are very attuned to, you know, how Kickstarter, how many people signed up for it. And you have to sign up. I bet I'm signed up to buy 20 or 30 games right now that are in various stages of publication, and I'll be billed when they ship it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Speaking of being billed when they ship, that's a horrible segue, but we're going to go with it. What has Hollywood gotten wrong and right about being a Marine? Gunny Highway, right? No, yes.
So I would tell you, so what Hollywood largely gets wrong is it's hyperbole. Everybody, everyone's crying or shouting and screaming. And in reality, most Marines, particularly in difficult situations, tend to be pretty flat and direct and pretty transactional. So, there's not a lot of the stuff you see in Hollywood. There are some okay war movies out there. There aren't many okay war movies. I mean, I think I was always a fan of Sam Peckinpah's Cross of Iron.
Yes,
with just in Yugoslavia.
James Coburn.
James Coburn and Maximilian Schell. And that movie is from 1976, I believe. Pretty good movie. It sort of captured the essence, I think, of small unit fighting. Probably not a politically correct movie today, but nonetheless, it was a very good film. I think it's hard to do because you need to manufacture drama, you need to manufacture emotion, and I worked most of my life trying to reduce drama and reduce emotion. From decision making and from tactical situations. Look, it's there because people are getting hurt, and that's a very emotional situation. But there's not a lot of people making Henry V speeches. If they stand up for one thing, they're probably going to get shot. And it's a very different. The modern battlefield, and by the modern battlefield, I really mean World War II on, is just very different. It's a lot flatter. So I think Hollywood gets a lot wrong, and they're always pushing a message, overt or covert, about what they want you to take away from it. And so I tend to watch movies like that not for the main theme of the movie, but there might be some particular element of it that I like. Not a lot though.
I just it just recently came out on Netflix, but it's the remake of All Quiet on the Western Front.
The remake.
Yes,
Oh.
it's a German producers made it, and it's pretty powerful. I mean,
It is pretty
I'll check it
powerful,
out.
but it's
Yeah.
really from the German angle.
yes,
So you
yes,
need to
it
bear
does.
that in mind. It's
Exactly.
the equivalent of Das Boot, which
Yes,
is the
Ah,
German
that's a great
side of the
movie. Yep.
U-boat war in World War II, which is again made as Das Boot is an excellent movie. You can buy it now with either English subtitles or dubbed English. But the best way to watch a German movie actually is to watch it in German with subtitles.
Yep.
Because you get the language.
Yeah.
Another great movie I would tell you, it's not really, so it's sort of a war movie. The German movie is Downfall. It's about the
yes,
end of Hitler.
the last days of Hitler. Yes,
That's another German movie. I found that to be better than, I think more accurate philosophically to the problems of the German regime than either Das Boot or All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, and those for those like the Das Boot, you really get, and the on All Quiet, you get that sense of from I call it the soldier sailor's perspective, and it kind of
that's a very strong part of both those films. Yep.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree.
Whereas the downfall, that you really get at least you can see and get an appreciation for what at that point in time what the problems the Germans were facing, and then of course the guy driving the train for the Germans, how he was kind of off the rails, pun intended.
Yes.
So speaking of off the rails, again, another pointless segue. Why? And now this is almost a partisan question, and this is a polarizing topic here with our fan base. Why is Star Trek superior to Star Wars?
Well, that's immediately obvious. I mean, if you have to ask that question, I'd actually wonder about your basic understanding of what the two genres try to do. I mean, look, so Star Trek, it's an attempt by people of goodwill to impose order on the universe. And so, because, as you know, when bad men combine, good men must associate. And that's the heart of Star Trek. They don't get it right all the time, but they're trying to do the right thing. And so that, to me, it's a very clear story, and I think it's a very important story. Whereas Star Wars, it's a little more complex, and it's difficult to actually determine who the good guys are there at different times, because they're not. Let me back up a second. Star Trek's actually, I think, better fleshed out in terms of its arc of the story. Star Wars, despite all the movies that have been made, all the spinoffs, it's much less fleshed out, at least to me. So I prefer Star Trek. Now, my sister is a huge Star Wars nut, and I infuriate her all the time by you see the new Star Trek movie? What about Star Trek 8? She has trouble dealing with that because she's a real Star Wars person, and I respect those people, flawed as they are.
There was also like Star Wars has, which I love, I love both of them, but Star Trek was trying to do something, was trying to make a political point, right? And Star Wars was supposed to be fun, and then they've gone back and tried to make it as if it had a point, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So one had a perspective and the other didn't. And Star Wars ultimately, like, it's about certain people are just gifted with this. With
the force, yeah,
and it becomes like a genetic thing almost. Like,
that's right.
What is everybody supposed to do? And whereas Star Trek was about
Plus,
good bureaucracy.
The standard of small arms shooting by the Empire in Star Wars, I mean, truly is horrific. I mean,
it's almost like the 18.
Never hit anything. All these guys, the Imperial Stormtroopers, they can't do anything right. Plus, the Imperial space building program, the Death Star. Holy cow, they can never get that thing together. They're always behind budget, and it's very vulnerable. I mean, you would think, for an empire that builds those Star Destroyers, they would have figured out that maybe the Death Star is not the way to go. At least
but they did it twice.
Let's get it finished before we rush it off into combat.
Right.
So I question their basic space building plan, the concepts behind it. The Empire just never seems to learn.
Yeah, the idea, their bureaucracy was poor because they were not investing in good, like, middle management training.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
And we're
right.
not.
And
we're
Vader,
not
you know, if he sees somebody he doesn't like, he chokes the guy to death. So that really motivates, feel great officers.
Well,
right.
that's
Talk
right.
about overreacting to bad news.
That's exactly
It's
correct.
a classic example.
Yeah.
Now, all those guys, they kill the guy that brings them bad news. Well, that's not gonna make them bring it the right news. It's gonna make them try to cover it up.
Kirk would probably say, I got to think of an instance where he did it, but he probably would have said, "Thank you for bringing this to me. This gives us enough time
Right.
to come up with a solution."
I don't
appreciate that.
remember James T. Kirk killing anybody on the bridge because they gave him bad news. Okay, I'm just saying.
No, but he would say something to the effect of, "I'm responsible for the lives of 325 members."
His
of my
only
crew."
problem, we were watching this the other day. I don't know if it was one or two, but his only problem was in the movies, I don't know if the show less, but he was always put himself on the away team.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
that's right.
captain.
Stop
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
yourself on the away team. Like there are others,
right.
you might be good in
Well,
combat.
what you didn't want to do,
situations.
what you didn't want to do, was to be one of the security guys that went down on the away team because
Exactly.
they
Yeah,
infallibly died
well, exactly.
every time.
Yeah.
Every time they got killed.
Yeah. Yeah. The only
So the
guy.
real question, Ernie, and I'm surprised you didn't ask it, is it Star Trek or Picard in the new Star Trek?
Yeah.
That's the real question. And so, again, everyone knows it's the old Star Trek.
The
It's
original.
not the new Star Trek. The new Star Trek is nothing but a great bundle of weakness.
A great bundle of weakness. Wow.
Right.
So now, speaking of the old, what about the way that they've I'll call it rebooted Star Trek with the movies? So correct me if I'm wrong, that in one of the new movies with Chris Pine as
Right.
Captain Kirk, they basically travel through time, or they reset the entire sequence by setting off a black hole, a singularity near something.
There's always a black hole nearby when you need one.
Well, exactly right. I think we've got one here, at least next to yeah. But so really, but when you say that, I know there's different, I'll call it Star Trek.
So
storylines.
actually,
So
I like the Chris Pine Star
Chris
Trek.
Pine. Okay.
I like that. I don't like the Jean-Luc Picard,
Yeah, the Next Generation crew.
the Next Generation.
Yeah,
And that's the bundle. That's the great bundle of weaknesses lumbering around the universe. Pine is good. Star Trek 1's good. It's the guys in the middle that are weak.
What about what is it? Deep Space Nine? Is that still or any of
No,
those?
Babylon 5. There are a lot of.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest with you. I haven't seen it, but I have watched the new. There's a new Star Trek show out called Brave New Worlds. I think one season with set before, and that's actually quite good. It's set right before Kirk came along.
That's right.
It's actually pretty good.
I'm trying to remember the captain's name, who was the guy before Kirk, because I think he was in the pilot episode.
Admiral.
was.
Oh man. I'll think.
Yeah.
But I do say that
The pilot is it's a different captain.
It's not Captain Kirk.
It is.
He starts.
You're right. You're right.
But and I have to say that I learned everything I know about self-defense from Captain Kirk, because there is no move that can be there's no blocking for the clavicle chop. And then once you do that, I mean, it goes from there, and then and your hair comes right back, and you can have a ripped shirt, but it repairs itself. It's fantastic.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic. All right, here we are, number 5. We're going to we're journeying through space, segues into a long tour overseas. What is the meal you most craved when you returned to the United States? What's the meal that you missed the most and that you wanted when you came back from deployment?
That's a good question, Ernie. Because actually, I've never had a problem eating while deployed. You know what I'm saying? The food's usually pretty good because you leave on a ship, you come back on the ship, and so you're eating pretty good on the ship.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're missing food.
Good.
I would say I'll put it to you like this. I don't mean to be maudlin. Any meal I could eat with my wife.
Oh, there you go. That's excellent. Yes.
I'll pull that one from the jaws of disaster.
That's right.
Hey,
big salad.
The real
Big
question
salad.
you should have asked is, what's the best meal to eat if you're in the field in a tactical situation? And everybody knows the answer to that, of course, is beef enchiladas.
Beef enchiladas. Really?
When I was in Afghanistan as a MU commander for 4 months, and then in Iraq later, when we were in the field forward, I ate one meal a day and it was beef enchilada. I never ate anything but a beef enchilada meal.
So
Had
really,
we made that the only meal in the MRE, we could have won those wars in half the time.
you think so? Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, now the question, I don't remember. Did that meal come with the jalapeno cheese or just
It
regular?
did. It came
Yeah,
with jalapeno cheese, crackers, came
Yeah.
with the, with that. We came with the entree itself, and it came with a powdered, with a powdered Kool-Aid powder. That
Yeah.
you could either eat directly or mix if you showed light. But I tell you, I ate one of those a day and nothing else.
Yeah.
Wow.
When I was in the field.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than a beef enchilada, and with a little Tabasco sauce, nothing better than a beef enchilada. That's the meal of champions.
I want to say there's probably only one of those in the case of MREs. Now, was there ever a time where you had to take the rank off and get to wrestle for it, or was it just kind of, oh, hey, the general likes the beef enchiladas? Or, I mean, like, did Sergeant Major come in and say, hey,
It
sir,
usually
we're gonna have words?
worked out. Someone handed me a beef enchilada.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good to know. So we'll have to make sure we start
Because
finding.
a lot of people don't like beef enchiladas, though.
Well,
It's not a universal favorite.
it does it, but I don't think it falls in the same as what was it? Tuna casserole. That was always like a.
No,
That's
yeah,
like
yeah, you're right. Tuna casserole was uniquely bad.
yeah. That's it, and then I will say the newer MREs were actually pretty darn good compared
They're very
to.
good.
Yeah,
They're very
we
good.
had the.
They're excellent. They're excellent.
We called the hot dogs we called them the four fingers of death.
Yep.
And then you had it was the oatmeal bar. That was almost like a sharpening stone. It was
the oatmeal bar. You're right. You're right. Gosh, you're exactly right. And there was a I forget what the candy was.
Charms.
There was a cookie. I think it was a cookie in the beef enchilada, sugar cookie or something like that. That was the dessert.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember like the charms. You didn't eat the charms. They were bad luck. In this period of time, you better drink a lot of water when you were eating that stuff too.
That's right. You're right. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
That was well, so that brings us to the end of our show here. And so, General, thank you very much for joining us. This has really been fantastic. And if our listeners could connect with you in Cyber Florida, how would they do that?
Well, there are a lot of ways. We have a website, and I would encourage them to come to the website and enter through there. And Ernie, why don't you provide the information on that?
Absolutely, www.cyberflorida.org.
And that is a great way to get in touch with me. And I'm happy to talk to anyone that would like to reach out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, General. This has been really fantastic.
It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed working with all of you. Have a great holiday season, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, General.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our program, and thank you for joining us. First and foremost, I have to thank my co-host, Jack Clabby, and a special thank you to our guest, General McKenzie. He's a senior leader who shows us that even though you might read Rolling Stone magazine, you can still reach the heights of any profession. So that said, let's remember to rate, review, and subscribe to No Password Required Podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. And if you'd like some show swag, just ask and we'll hook you up. I'm Ernie Ferreso. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Second Watch. If you would like to learn more about the show, visit our website at cyberflorida.org/pod. And if you still need more show content, check out our social media at No Password Pod.